Stan Campbell, following his team's loss to the Rams. Welcome back, X's and Bros, Monday through Friday, 6 until 9. Next Gen Stats. Depends on what you believe. Next Gen Stats have the Lions at 50% to make the playoffs. You would have thought it would have been worse. New York Times Simulator has them at 41%. That same simulator, if they win out, if they beat Pittsburgh at home, if they win at Minnesota, and if they win at Chicago, 94% playoff chance of making it. First things first, Pittsburgh comes calling, and Pittsburgh wraps up the week tonight against Miami. Remember this. Aaron Rodgers is 18-8 all time against Detroit. I hate to burst bubbles. He's got 54 touchdowns and 12 picks in his career against the Lions. Now, he's different. He's a lot different now. That's not the most, by the way. I think the most he's ever thrown was against Chicago, 64 touchdowns against the Bears. His best record against any team is Chicago. He's 24-5. But 18-8 against Detroit is pretty damn good. All right. The 54 touchdowns that he's thrown against the Lions is the third most against any team. It figures because he was in Green Bay for so long. He's thrown more touchdowns against Chicago, then Minnesota, then Detroit. Okay? So we can talk more about that later in the week. The problem you have this week is what happened yesterday against the Rams. When did it turn? So I was watching this game and I said, there's a bit of a third quarter malaise that this team was dealing with. 3 straight 3-and-outs. Anytime your favorite team loses, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's the Pistons. I don't care if it's the Tigers, Red Wings, Lions, Michigan State, Griffins, whomever. I don't care. Grand Valley, Fair State. Whoever loses, you want to point a finger. Everybody does. That's normal, I think. Where do you point it today? Do you point it at the offense for 3 straight 3-and-outs to start the third? Some people may do that, and I understand. The immediate thought, I think, is the defense. Look at the defense. You see how many yards they give up. You see the points, obviously. You see the throwing yards. That has to burn Lions fans' brains big time. My God, man. How can you let a former our guy, Stafford, beat us the way they did? 30 first downs for the Rams. 30. They weren't very good on third down, but they were perfect on 3 fourth down tries. They ran 7 more plays than Detroit and gained over 100 yards more. They averaged 7.5 yards per play. They averaged 9 yards per play through the air. And they outrushed Detroit 160-70. I think what we're saying here, folks, is that you can point the finger in a lot of different directions, and it probably would fit. So the Lions are now 8-6. They are a game under 500 on the road, which perhaps begs the question later this week, what makes you think that they can reel off 3 consecutive wins? I mean, be honest. What makes you think that? You haven't seen it since early October. I'm talking about 2 straight wins, let alone 3 straight wins. Now, friends of ours, it's always good to check the social media clip once in a while. And our producer, Brett Hayes, today is a stalwart in the afternoons with Bill Simonson, The Huge Show. And Billy gets emotional, and I love that about him. He says the Lions have 3 games left to save their season. Home losses to the Vikings and Packers will haunt this team for a long time. I don't think the loss at Green Bay will haunt them. Green Bay's a good football team. It's the home loss to Minnesota. And I've said this very consistently throughout the year since that happened. That is the game that I think a lot of people were taken aback by, because there's not a ton of respect for JJ McCarthy as a professional yet. Sure, as a collegiate player, but as a professional, probably not. Although last night he threw for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns, ran for another touchdown, and Minnesota went into Dallas and beat Dallas. But Billy tweeted, "This is the third year in a row. We all thought the Lions had enough talent to win the NFC. Injuries are a legitimate excuse, but poor coaching and decision making prior to massive injuries also hurt the Lions in each of the last 3 years in big games." Well, I would say 2 years ago, I don't think that was the case. They had a big halftime lead at San Francisco. I don't think decision making prior to the massive injuries 2 years ago was a problem. Last year, sure, you could argue that. But it's interesting that this team, and I think anytime somebody brings up massive injuries, they immediately think of who? They think of Aiden Hutchinson, do they not? Absolutely. You almost have to remind people that Aiden Hutchinson was injured in week 6 for the Lions last year. Okay? That was against Dallas. All right? So after that, and it's not that I don't think he's an important piece to that proverbial puzzle. He absolutely is. There's no doubt about it. But I just remind people that after that game against Dallas, Detroit went on a run. Detroit played really good football. They won at Minnesota. They beat Tennessee. They won at Green Bay. They came back and won at Houston. They won at Jacksonville. They won at Indy. They won at Chicago. They won against Green Bay again. They lost to Buffalo, and then they closed with 3 straight wins. That team, after losing Aiden Hutchinson, went on a massive roll. We're going to blame the loss to Washington, where they didn't look very prepared as far as I was concerned. They looked like they took some things for granted. They didn't play the way they were supposed to play. We're going to look at that and say, well, that's on the front office when they actually did something about it, bringing in Zadarius Smith. I think that's on players, man. It's okay to blame the front office for certain things. Believing in Marcus Davenport's health, ridiculous. Believing Josh Pascal was going to come back, ridiculous. Believing Levi Onwuzurike was going to come back, ridiculous. Flubbing the situation with Kevin Zeitler, who wanted to come back here, by the way, had bought a new house. You could blame them on that. That's fine. I agree 100% with you. Don't give me this crap last year against Washington that it's on the front office for not doing something about. They did replenish the defensive end spot. And they did it with what many people considered a very productive player. So much so that you wanted him back this year. So much so that when Philly did sign him, you said, that's the GM I want, not the GM I have. And then that player promptly retired. This year's been a huge disappointment. I would say this is a bigger disappointment this year than the last 2 because of preseason expectations. Our phone number on the Meijer hotline, 866-838-4843. You can text us 21,000. Got some text we'll get to when we come back. Mitch Lyons joins us 718 here on X's and Bros on the Michigan Sports Network. Again, Dan Campbell following his team's loss in Los Angeles. Other teams in the division. You look at what the Bears have done. They blow out the Browns. That's kind of expected, 31-3. Chicago defense holding Cleveland to just 192 total yards, 9 first downs. They picked off Shedeur Sanders 3 times. Bears are now 10-4. Really good at home as well. I wonder how many people are bragging about the Shedeur Sanders like they did last week. I mean, it's amazing how quickly things can change in sports, and that's why you got to be very careful when you start making outlandish statements and overall praise and things of that nature. There were people early in the season, Josh Allen was incredible, and then there was a dip, and people started to worry, well, where's the Superman cape? Did you see him yesterday? His team was down 21-0. And they came back and won in Foxborough when the Patriots were calling it a hat and T-shirt day. In other words, they were going to celebrate a division championship. Instead, that's put on hold because of Buffalo's really impressive win, and it was primarily because of Josh Allen. You could make the case, and Drake May was good early on, but you could make the case Josh Allen just thrust himself back into the MVP conversation again. After winning it a year ago, you could say that he is as good this year as he was all of last year because of what his team has had to do. Like, there was a time when I'm watching that game and I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Buffalo, who was trying to get by Kansas City and trying to get by Baltimore, now has to face this New England team. You talk about frustration. And then what do? They come back and they get the win. Packers and Broncos had a battle at Mile High. It was a good football game. Denver takes them down 34-26. 11 straight wins now for the Denver Broncos to clinch a playoff spot. Bo Nix, I know there's a lot of people who don't believe in him. To a certain extent, I get it because it's been primarily their defense, but 303 yards and 4 touchdowns. They're 12-2, man. At some point, someone's going to go, you know what? They deserve some credit. If your team's 12-2 after 14 weeks of the NFL, 15 weeks, but they had the bye. If they're 12-2 and they're not, people aren't saying you're the best team in football or you're not the best team in your division or the best team in your conference, you're pissed, and rightfully so. Green Bay drops from what was number 2 all the way to 7th because Chicago climbs from 7th to 2. After their victory. Minnesota, as I mentioned, beat Dallas last night. It's not that I think Minnesota is special. It's not that I think J.J. McCarthy is either. I'm not a big fan of rushing into a touchdown and dancing at the 2-yard line before you cross the goal line. But you've got to give some credit where credit is due. He threw for 250 yards, a couple of touchdowns, and as I mentioned, rushed for a touchdown as well. Minnesota, isn't it interesting? Detroit gained 70 yards on the ground and lost in LA. Minnesota gained 77 yards on the ground. Didn't throw for a ton of yards, but won in Dallas. It's the way it works. They're 6-8. Okay? Like I said, Miami visits Pittsburgh tonight. The surprise, some of the surprising things during the NFL, Week 15. Kansas City lost to the Chargers. They missed the playoffs for the first time since 2014. Patrick Mahomes out for the rest of the year and part of next year because of a knee injury. Bills come, as I mentioned, from 21 points down. They beat the Patriots 36-31. That prevents them from clinching the AFC East, and it snaps the Pats' 10-game winning streak. And it was their first divisional loss of the year. Here's the Mitch Lions Wealth Poll question. Is the Lions season over? Yes or no? How much do you believe in this team? Is it over? Yes or no? You can vote as often as you want at XB Mornings, and we will tabulate the results and give them to you in the 8 o'clock hour tomorrow. I will retweet it as well. There are people out there saying, don't blame the defense. It's on the offense and some of the play calling. Okay. First of all, and I mentioned this, 3 straight 3-and-outs to start the third. Rams defense is decent. All right. They are. They're pretty good. They're 4th in the league in scoring against. They're top 10 in rushing defense, top 10 in third down efficiency defense, and so on and so forth. But don't want to make excuses. I do believe that the Lions offense going 3-and-out, obviously very painful. And you could argue game turning. But I'm not giving the defense a free pass for crying out loud. I mean, it was pretty regular where Matthew Stafford was getting enough time and picking them apart. Detroit didn't have an answer. And I think too often times this year, we have allowed the defense to get a bit of a free pass. We're blaming the offense more than we blame the defense. A lot of that has to do with the coordinators. One has been replaced, John Morton, and should be gone after the season. And the other one has stayed consistent, fiery, energetic, had to deal with a lot of injuries. That's what we say. Shep, look, they don't play with Kirby Joseph. They're not playing with Brian Branch. Terrion Arnold is out for the entire season. Fair enough. Detroit lost their starting left guard. They lost 2 key pieces in the offseason. One of their wide receivers was suffering from a high ankle sprain, although he came back the last 2 weeks. He's been incredible. You've lost your best tight end and one of the best tight ends in football. Injuries happen, man. There's a lot of teams that are dealing with injuries. Ask the San Francisco 49ers, who've lost one of the best linebackers in all of football, Fred Warner, about injuries and how they lost Christian McCaffrey at the beginning of the season and how they lost wide receivers as well, traded one away. I mean, come on, man. They were able to find a way and get it done. I'm not going to sit here and blame injuries. I'm not going to blame referees. Do I think Parkinson's touchdown was fair? No. His knee was clearly down. Did he catch the ball? Good debate. Probably not enough to overturn. If that's the case, how is he not at the 1-yard line? Do they probably score? Well, in all likelihood, but you never know. Guys fumble snaps. Guys get penalized for illegal motion, drive you back. Could have been 3 points instead of 7. Could have been a turnover. They could have got stingy and said, you know what, we're going to go for it on 4th down and not make it. You never know. But I'm not going to sit here and blame the referees on a really bad call. There were bad calls. There's been bad calls all year long, not just on Detroit. And not just in terms of teams we thought deserved more of a punishment. Oh, Kansas City didn't have any penalties against Detroit. The Rams, finally, they called a penalty. Somebody on social media yesterday, when the Rams got their first penalty, oh my gosh, you know, they finally a flag. Detroit only had 4 penalties called against them, man. LA ended up with 2. Were there things that I should have been called? Yeah. See it on a regular basis. Sometimes it's a give and take. Unfortunately, for the Lions, it was nothing like that. This is a team that didn't punt until like 6.5 minutes left to go in the third. Was their first punt. And they had a nice pick that led to a touchdown from Aiden Hutchinson. But it's a team right now that is, you know, I think sometimes you have to come to the realization that you're just not as good as you thought you were going to be. And I'm talking about from a fan perspective. And no one believed in them more than I did at the beginning of the season. And we don't learn, you know. I said, this is the best team in football. I truly believe that. On a 4-game roll, I said they're the best team in football. I stood by this team, just like you did, stood by this team, thinking they were still the best team in football, despite the loss to Kansas City. And then the bounce back against Tampa, and I was ready to say, see, I told you. Then it changed. Then I was shaken. Then my belief was broken. My faith was broken when they lost to the Vikings 27-24. I know they bounced back against Washington, then the low loss to Philadelphia. It's been win-loss. It's actually been a loss-win ever since the 4-game win streak, every single week. And I heard a lot of players afterwards saying, this is who we are. We're a resilient group. I don't doubt that. I'm not going to get hyperbolic and sit there and try to tell people, oh, you know what, this team's really not that good, so on and so forth. You know, I never believed in them. Bull crap. I did believe in them. Do I think they should have done some things? Absolutely. Do I think they're resilient? Yeah, it sure seems like they are by not allowing one loss to turn into two. But they have not done the things this season to string a winning streak together. And they've given you no reason to think since the Bengals game, which seems like a long, long time ago, because it was a long, long time ago. They've never given you an inkling that they could string this together. So do I think they can beat Pittsburgh? Absolutely. Do I think they'll win in Minnesota? I wonder. Do I think they'll win at Chicago? It scares you. It does. It scares you because Chicago's defense is really good. And it's better than your defense. Your defense isn't very good. It's as simple as that. Let me get to some texts here real quick. Always good to talk with Freddie. Freddie mentioned, San Francisco also lost Bosa. They lost Purdy. Yeah, they've lost a ton, and yet they have found a way. Robert Saleh has kept his defense in it. You can say what you want about Kyle Shanahan, but I'll be damned. That's a tough division. You could argue the NFC West is the best division in football. You got the Rams at 11-3. You got the Seahawks at 11-3. You got the Niners at 10-4. And San Francisco, by the way, has won 4 in a row. All right? Those are pretty damn good numbers. They are what the NFC North was a year ago. Okay? Rams have already made the playoffs. You would expect the other two to make the playoffs too. I don't know who's going to win the South. I don't care who wins the South. They're not very good. It's Tampa, Carolina. I mean, Carolina had the door wide open to take over first place, and they lost to New Orleans, for crying out loud. Think about that. Philadelphia is going to win the East. Dallas is basically out at 6-7-1. They need too much help. And then you're going to have 2 teams from the NFC North. It's going to be either Chicago and Green Bay or Green Bay and Detroit. I don't think it's going to be Chicago and Detroit. Although Green Bay did lose Micah Parsons for the rest of the season, which you hate to see that because the guy's an unbelievable player. He's been awesome for the Packers. It's a pretty big loss, don't you think? They've lost their best offensive pass catcher. Okay, Tucker Kraft is out, has been out, and now they've lost their most impactful defensive player. So if anyone's got a reason to complain and or look for excuses, it might be a team like Green Bay. Before, it was a team like San Francisco. And before the season began, you could also argue that people in Buffalo should not have felt very good because they didn't address some of the needs that team needed, including getting some type of big-time wide receiver. Yet they're 10-4. How is that possible? They've won 3 in a row. Miami was down and out. I thought that team was done. I thought they were going to fire Mike McDaniel. So did you. They've won 4 in a row. Now they're only 6-7, but you understand. They have strung together some wins at this time of the year. All these teams, even though I think Detroit is better than many of them from a talent standpoint, all these teams are finding ways to get it done and string together victories. The Lions haven't been able to do that. Why is that? Don't stop with the schedule. The schedule isn't daunting. All you got to do is look at those teams and tell yourself, yes, those teams are definitely beatable. You played the AFC North this year. You played a much weaker NFC East this year. Those were beneficial. You just haven't taken advantage of it. How many people today, and you can't say this without people thinking, oh my gosh, you're a hater, which is completely untrue, because I marvel at this guy and I would sign him to a long-term contract. But how many people today are saying Jahmyr Gibbs better than Barry Sanders? That was a legitimate thing on social media in Detroit. There were people who actually thought that. Asinine. Let's get caught up in a moment, shall we? Let's be fanboy for a moment, shall we? Let's not even consider what Barry Sanders was, shall we? Jahmyr Gibbs yesterday, 13 carries, 38 yards. Receiving wise, 4 catches, 20 yards. 58 total yards from the guy who some people thought was better than Barry Sanders earlier this year. Anyway, via text, and you can text us, Sports Radio 21,000. Freddie says, this organization has become the 2007 Detroit Tigers, somehow needs to get back to the 2012 Detroit Tigers. Everyone will look at the paper and see the quarterback numbers and say, wow, he looks different and not interested. Is it his human nature for having a newborn? I don't know. But something he's only got chemistry with St. Brown. Well, I think he's got great trust in St. Brown. I think he has trust in a lot of guys, quite honestly. Jameson Williams on pace for 1,000 yards, man. I don't think he only has trust in St. Brown. So I would disagree with that, or has chemistry, excuse me. Jameson Williams caught 7 passes for 134 yards, man. What are we talking about here? Seriously. You think he only has chemistry with one guy? Let me ask you this. Do you think he had chemistry with Jameson Williams last year? I think a lot of people feel like he did. Okay. When you have, I understand there's not as much with Amon-Ra St. Brown, but last year he had 58 catches. He was targeted 91 times last year. He had 58 catches for over 1,000 yards. This year he's got 52 catches for almost 940 yards. And has as many touchdowns this year as he had all of last year. He's got 3 games left. So I disagree. I think he's got really good chemistry with Jameson Williams. I think he's got really good chemistry with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he's got really good chemistry with Sam Laporta when he's healthy. I don't look at it that way. Looking forward to hearing the GM and owner end of the year. It can't always be Dan taking the arrows. I don't think it is. But he is the guy who has the most say in the game plan for the day. But I'm with you on that. I look forward to hearing what the general manager has to say as well. Let's hope he doesn't have to get there for a while. Phone number on the Meijer hotline is 866-838-4843. You can text us, Sports Radio 21,000. Quick timeout, 7:18. Mitch Lyons joins us. It's Mondays with Mitch. 8:18, we've got Hero and Heel. And at 8:35, really looking forward to this. The Grand Rapids Griffins won again last night. They're off to the best start in AHL history. Dan Watson, their head coach, joins us on X's and Bros. So that's Jared Goff. Welcome back. Second hour of X's and Bros throughout the great state of Michigan, Monday through Friday, 6 until 9. We're brought to you by Meijer. Here's what I think oftentimes will happen when it comes to two teams led by, I would call, two top 10 quarterbacks. One's having an MVP-like season, Matthew Stafford. One had an MVP-like season a year ago, and at times has played like an MVP this year. In fact, I would argue Jared Goff was better in the first half yesterday than Matthew Stafford was. If you disagree, feel free. You can do that on the Meijer hotline, 866-838-4843. You can text us, Sports Radio, to 21,000. But what happens is the comparison between the two quarterbacks is the difference. Stafford was better than Goff yesterday overall, so Stafford is better than Goff. The Rams are better than the Lions. It is all on the quarterback. It's his fault. Let me ask you a quick question. Do you know that the Lions have one of the top 5 paid defensive linemen in all of football? Are you aware of that? I'm sure you are. I hope you are. How many times did you hear Aleem McNeil's name called yesterday? How many times did you hear Tariq Williams' name called yesterday? First round pick. You didn't. I know. Me either. You heard Roy Lopez because I believe he had a sack. Yeah, he did. He had a sack. You finally heard a little bit more from Aiden Hutchinson, who had 3 tackles and a sack and an interception, which is awesome. Of course, you heard Jack Campbell. He led everybody in tackles with 14, including 10 solos. Why is it's on the QB in a situation like this, and we don't look at anybody else? Because the thought is, for the Lions defense, you'll make an excuse. 41 points. Oh, my God, that's a lot. Yeah, well, they were playing with a makeshift secondary. Wait a minute. Timeout. That makeshift secondary against Tampa drew wide praise. Baker Mayfield at the time was having an MVP type of campaign. At least that's what the national pundits were saying, because we like to start voting on MVP in week 6, for crying out loud, in the National Football League. That's what happens. We get way ahead of ourselves. Well, we got to fill some content, so this is what we're going to do. But anyway, that's what they were saying about Baker Mayfield, how impressed they were with Baker Mayfield this year. Okay, I get it. I thought he was impressive too. I mean, you're talking to a guy right now who picked Tampa as a sleeper in the NFC. Boy, was I wrong. So we're going to look at quarterbacks. But that secondary was good enough to beat a good quarterback and a good Tampa team, at least we thought at the time, at home earlier this year. Held them to only 9 points. And yet, we'll look at yesterday's game. 34 points apparently isn't enough. It's going to be, let's blame Jared Goff. 3 touchdowns, no picks. Okay? Let's blame Jared Goff. Let's blame the offense. Let's blame the offensive line. All those other things. Goff was only sacked once. Stafford was sacked twice. But you're not going to blame the defense because you felt like they're shorthanded in the secondary. Well, they weren't shorthanded up front. Where is everybody? You can't keep relying on Jack Campbell and Alex Anzalone and Derek Barnes to make all the plays. And I'm not looking just at tackles, okay? I understand that the defensive tackles and the defensive ends, they engage that offensive line. And by the time that quarterback or that running back or somebody kind of slips their way past the line of scrimmage, boom, there's the Lions linebacker. The front guys, the defensive line, occupy the offensive line. The linebackers are there to clean it up. It's not unique to the Lions. I get all that. But where have we seen the impact from Detroit's interior defensive line? We haven't. I like Aleem McNeil. I'm glad he's a Lion, but he has been pretty much non-existent. Oh, well, let's put him out of the defensive end. He's this talented, guys. He's this good, man. Really, is he? Haven't seen it. Haven't seen any of these guys make a giant leap forward. Tyleik Williams came in as a first-round pick. I had a friend of mine tell me earlier this year, I've watched, and they played at Michigan. They said, I've watched every Michigan game. I don't remember him standing out at all against Ohio State. And my thought was, damn, I don't either. It's a good point. Now, I remember some guys standing out, and they haven't been very good pros, but he's right about that. Aleem McNeil was paid handsomely. Where is he? Aiden Hutchinson, you want more pressure. He had a sack yesterday. That's good. He's got 9.5. 2 weeks ago, it was Muhammad. How good was he? Where was he yesterday? It's okay to point a finger at this guy or that guy on offense. That's fine because you win and lose as a team, I suppose. But my goodness, I mean, we're talking about other guys who are supposed to step forward too, you know. It can't just be once in a while for Al-Qadim Muhammad. He had one tackle yesterday. Was he pressuring Stafford? Barely, if at all. At least from what we could recognize. So frustrating. And now, because of all this, it means that Detroit's going to have to rely on somebody else to get it done. And then when you get to the postseason, look, anything can happen, right? I mean, look at what happened last year with Washington. We've seen it in baseball. You can have a great regular season. Hi, Milwaukee, and then lose in the first round. I get all that. It's just so damn frustrating when you see something fall apart like this, knowing that you have what we would consider a lot of talent like this. And my mind goes to moving forward, right? What happens with this team after this year, knowing that every team is different? Where are you going to go with it? Running backs weren't very good. They rely on the offensive line. I understand that. Okay. So very minimal run game. Secondary failed. There's no question about that. Special teams was okay. Coaching, you know, when a team loses and when a team gives up 41 points, sure, Dan Campbell's he's gonna take the arrows. At some point, my hope is somebody's going to be talking about Kelvin Sheppard. We gave him a ton of love earlier this year. After the Tampa game, we said that game right there puts him on the radar for other teams and a possible head coaching vacancy. That's what we said. But since that time, whether they've been fully healthy or not, defense hasn't been up to snuff. Mitch Lyons was watching it yesterday. He's got some thoughts. We're going to talk with him. It's Mondays with Mitch. It's a staple of ours every Monday at 7:18. He joins the conversation to talk Lions and a whole lot more, some college football too. Mitch Lyons joins us on X's and Bros. Brought to you by Meijer right after this. 35 after the hour at in the 8 o'clock hour, 8:35. We're going to talk with the Griffins head coach. It's been awesome. What's been going on in Grand Rapids from a hockey standpoint? The Red Wings they've been fun to watch too. Don't get me wrong. I have. I've at times they've been as consistent as we'd like, obviously, but what team is, right? But we've enjoyed, for the most part, the Red Wings and how well they've played. It's a team that is it's giving you some hope, I think. And they had a good road trip, really good road trip, capped off by a 4-0 win over Chicago. Alex DeBrincat has caught fire. I mean, they're tied for first in the Atlantic with 39 points. There's only 3 teams in the entire East that are better than them in terms of points: Carolina, the Islanders, which is a surprise to me anyway, and the Capitals. So I think the Red Wings have been pretty entertaining. They got as many wins as Tampa. That's saying something, but they pale in comparison to what Grand Rapids has done. The Griffins have set an AHL record for their consistency. They're 22-1-0-1. Best start in AHL history. They deserve some pub. Grand Rapids has got themselves a big-time winner. Dan Watson, their head coach, will join us at 8:35. We were hoping to talk with Mitch Lyons. It is usually Mondays with Mitch at this time of the day, this time of the week. But we're having some technical difficulties. So as we work through that, we will continue with the conversation with you. Somebody had texted me and said I would call Cincinnati. At least let them say no. Goff, 2 1s, and a player they want from a list. I assume that's for Joe Burrow. I would. I don't think that's the issue. For some reason, the more it takes place, the longer this goes, the more people start to question a guy whose name everybody chanted, in Jared Goff. Joe Burrow injured this year. 2 years ago was injured. Some people feel like he's a little injury prone. I don't go that far. He started every game last year. He started every game in 2021, his second year, every game in 2022 as well. I think he's a hell of a player. I assume that's what the texter is suggesting. But look, what do you think the biggest problem is? Let's put it that way. In all honesty, what do you think is the biggest issue the Lions have? Do you think it's the quarterback? Do you think it's the offensive line? Do you think it's coaching? Do you think it's defensive line? Do you think it's secondary? You don't have to say specific players. Do you think it's front office? Who would have thought this 2 years ago? Honestly, who would have ever thought this? That people are talking this way. I would not have predicted this at all. Not in this 3-year span in which you have so many players still in the prime of their careers. So many players who are still capable of playing at a high level. But it's interesting how it's puzzling how we never want to blame a player we'd like or somebody who's had recent success that we kind of went all in on. So, for example, how can you blame Jahmyr Gibbs, right? That makes a lot of sense. Who in the right mind would blame him? Well, why would you, considering what he's done recently? Well, he wasn't very good yesterday. Let's pick it up with Mitch Lyons from Mitch Lyons Wealth at MitchLyonsWealth.com. It's Mondays with Mitch, every Monday at 7:18 here on X's and Bros. Mitch, we appreciate it as always. I know you were in on the Lions game for sure. What do you think their biggest issue is right now? Why are they so inconsistent? How would you pinpoint it? Mm-hmm. Mhm. What gives you hope they can win out? They need to win out the last 3 games, and including that last one against Chicago. And quite honestly, they need the Bears to lose to either Green Bay or San Francisco before losing to Detroit at the end of the year. So the possibility is still there. But bottom line is they have to win out. What gives you hope that they can do that? Mm-hmm. 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 It's a fair point. Mitch Lyons from Mitch Lyons Wealth joining us here on X's and Bros like he does every Monday morning at 7:18. Pick up his book, Retirement at Steel, providing people with retirement advice. It's a digital copy there. Call him today, 866-85-STEEL. That's 866-85-STEEL. Fernando Mendoza won the Heisman Trophy Saturday night rather comfortably. Diego Pavia, Vanderbilt's quarterback, finished second. He had a nasty response to it, basically F all voters. What's your response to Diego Pavia's lack of personal control? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Hey, speaking of lack of class, real quick, because we only got about a minute left. What's the most disturbing thing from you as a former uh, Division One, Big Ten player and an NFL player about the Sharon Moore in Michigan situation? Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, well said, and the right way to look at it. Mitch, thanks, buddy. Always good to talk to you on a Monday. Have a great week, my friend. We'll talk soon. All right, Mitch Lyons from Mitch Lyons Wealth joining us here on Mondays with Mitch at 7:18. 8:18, we've got Hero and Heel. We look forward to some of your candidates for that. And 8:35, Dan Watson, head coach of the AHL record-setting Grand Rapids Griffins on X's and Bros.
Do you think that plays a role into the hesitancy to say anything like this with a high-profile situation? Yeah, at this stage of any investigation, I think you have to stay focused close to the best. Unless you're at the point where you have no needs and you need help from the general public for someone to identify a suspect and get evidence. So, I think it's prudent. LAPD is, I think, prudent. I think not releasing much information until they know.
It's Philip Rivers. I know, age 44, made his first start in 5 years, and had the Colts close to beating the Seahawks in Seattle. It was more Indianapolis's defense than it was Philip Rivers, who threw for only 120 yards, but he threw a touchdown, threw a pick too, but he also threw a touchdown. So, I mean, there were times where he looked pretty damn good. Obviously, not a high-scoring game in 18-16. Seattle wins in a last-second field goal, but it was a pretty cool story that you get a guy like Philip Rivers doing what he did yesterday after being gone for as long as he was gone. He's a grandfather, for crying out loud. He's not the only grandfather to have, won a game or played in a game in NFL history. Brett Favre, it happened with him. It happened with who's the other other athletes. Obviously, Gordie Howe it happened with Robert Parrish. It's happened with Julio Franco. It happened with Stan Musial. So he's not the only, I would say, grandfather to participate in a professional athletic event, but it was still a pretty cool moment. Welcome back. X's and Bros, Monday through Friday, 6 until 9, 866-838-4843. You can text us, Sports Radio, to 21,000. There was a point in time where I thought Detroit's defense was pretty damn good against Philadelphia, didn't you? Yeah. The Lions against the Eagles, and we at the time we thought, well, Detroit's been way too inconsistent. Philadelphia at the time was playing some pretty good football, so we thought, okay, well, this might be a measuring stick game. Eagles were 7-2 going in, and Detroit held them. Jalen Hurts to 135 yards, held Saquon Barkley to 83 yards rushing, held Philadelphia to just 16 points. Now, they couldn't score on Philadelphia because the Eagles beat them 16-9. But that gave you a little bit of hope, I think, because right after that, what did they do? They were ready to play the Giants, and you felt like, okay, this is where you can really put together back-to-back solid defensive efforts. Giants scored 27 points, had 517 total yards. Following week against Green Bay, 31 points and 360 total yards. Then Dallas, the defense allowed 30 points, 417 total yards. And then the Rams, 41 points, 519 total yards. They have allowed 1,800 total yards, 130 points during that span. That's an average of 32 points per game, 453 total yards per game. Go ahead and blame Jared Goff if you want. That's fine. If that's what makes you happy, fine. Okay? It's not all on him. Go ahead and blame John Morton for a bad offense, even though Dan Campbell's the one running it. If that's what makes you happy, go right ahead. But you better make sure you have enough room to blame the defense too. And that includes me. I've got to find enough room for that too. I know there are certain guys you like and you believe in and all that stuff, but sometimes those guys have tough days too. Sometimes those guys are part of the problem and haven't been able to solve it. And that's a problem for Detroit right now. You're giving up 32 points and 453 yards per game since that defensive showing against Philadelphia. It's just not good enough. The other thing that you have to look at is, the personnel. Because, again, people are going to look at Jared Goff and they're going to say, sorry, he hasn't been good enough. You've got to win and all this other stuff. And I think those are fair points. He shoulders some of this responsibility, but damn, I mean, and I don't want to hear about the resiliency. I guess I shouldn't. I guess I should look at it and say, what else do I want him to say? I don't know. I don't know what else I want him to say. But I do know that there are some things that are starting to frustrate me with guys at the podium. And I shouldn't let that get to me because they're answering questions. What makes you believe, Jared, that you can reel off 3 straight wins? I just asked that to Mitch Lyons. What makes you think they can do that? You and I, most people think they're done, even though depending on what you look at, if you look at next-gen stats, their playoff possibility is 50%. If you look at New York Times Simulator, it's at 41%. I think there's more people believe it's closer to the 41%. They think, in general, you need too much help. Well, hey, listen, if you look at, I'm not trying to be, Johnny positive here because I'm a little distraught when it comes to this whole thing. But if you look at the Chicago Bears, and that's where they need some help. Could Chicago lose 2 in a row or 2 of the next 3? Damn right they could. I would remind you, they haven't lost 2 in a row since the first 2 games of the year. They played Green Bay really tough 2 weeks ago. And they got to play a San Francisco team in San Francisco who's pretty damn good. But if you're worried about that, remember this. They have played some impressive road games so far this year, including one in Philadelphia not too long ago. So I'm not trying to tell you that I don't think the Lions have any shot. I'm just trying to tell you that you're expecting Chicago to fold when they really haven't given us any indication that they do fold. They lost 2 games at the beginning of the year back to back. They lost a road game in Baltimore, and 2 weeks ago, before beating Cleveland yesterday, they lost a road game in Green Bay, which you could have easily said at times they were as good as the Green Bay Packers in a 28-21 loss. Second quarter got away from them, but they responded pretty well in the third and the fourth. So when you look at the Lions, what gives you reason to think they can string together 3 in a row? Not much. If they need help from Chicago, what gives you reason to think that the Bears are going to lose 2 of 3? Not much. Just based on their recent history. Let's get to the phone lines, the Meijer hotline, 866-838-4843. Who do we got, Brett? Hey, Zach, good morning to you. How are you? Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah. Well, look, I know you got to. I know you got to go, so I'll let you go, Zach, and I appreciate it. The question would be, what type of adjustments do you want them to make? Because they have made adjustments. They were primarily a man team. They played zone each of the last 2 weeks. Worked against Dallas, did not work against Matthew Stafford. You know why it didn't work against Dallas? Because Detroit put a lot of pressure on him. Al-Qadim Muhammad and company went nuts. Yesterday, not enough pressure on Matthew Stafford. It's a little different, right? Because Matthew Stafford processes things so quickly and delivers the ball so quickly, in and out. Yesterday, a number of times where he's patting the ball and you can see his feet starting to shift a little bit. So there wasn't enough pressure on Matthew Stafford yesterday. But they did go zone. Puka Nacua across the middle. That's his own defense. So I don't disagree with anything your coach said. I think he's right. I mean, I think you have to make adjustments and play to the strength of your team for sure. I think he's right about that. I guess the difference is I do think Detroit has done that. It doesn't mean you fall into that. I'm not saying you are saying this. It doesn't mean you fall into that the entire time. Somebody had tweeted at me yesterday, and they said, this was from Redemptive Rob. He said, I'm interested in your opinion. With a high-powered offense like the Rams, don't you want to slow the game down just a tad? Forget that coach was a good manager of the clock, which people said he wasn't with 2 watches. But there's something to be said for keeping the ball out of their hands, don't you think? Okay, so my response is, I get what you mean, but for what it's worth, going into the game, and I get it can be very front-loaded, but for what it's worth, Detroit had the highest scoring offense in the league going into the game against the Rams. They had the most explosive plays in the NFL since Dan Campbell took over play calling. Be who you are. Why is it that suddenly, because you're concerned about the Rams, that you feel like, we've got to make sure our defense is our best offense and keep them off the field? I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I'm not going to reel in my offense because I'm worried about the other team's offense when my offense is supposedly just as explosive. Those 2 teams ran almost the same amount of plays. 7 is the difference. I guess that's a full drive, but even though each team had the same number of drives. It's not like Detroit was awful offensively. 34 points. It's pretty good. Don't you think? They had 6.5 yards per play. How many is enough is what I always ask myself. If you're looking at points per game, right? Forget yards for a moment. If you're looking at points per game, how many points per game should be enough to win you a game? Detroit averages 30.5 points per game, so they went above the average yesterday. You had the top 2 scoring teams in the NFL play yesterday. You knew that was going to be a shootout, right? So if you thought it was going to be a shootout, should you have played more conservatively? How do you do that when you're not running a football? You can hold the ball a little bit longer when you're gashing them and gouging them on the ground. You had 70 yards rushing. How are you going to do that? You're going to have to throw the football, right? There's extension of your run games, swing passes, and so bubble screens and slip screens and tunnel screens and things of that nature. But overall, you weren't able to get much success in that regard. I think they did make adjustments. I just don't think they have good enough personnel. And therein lies a separate frustration for us, I think. It's because we look at it and we just go, you know what? I mean, this is a team that should have cured a lot of its ills. And I don't disagree with you. I don't. I mean, I think you're 100% right when you say this team failed an opportunity to cover up some of their weaknesses or address some of their weaknesses, and they haven't done it. Now, there are other teams that did do it, and it hasn't paid off. How much has it really paid off for Philadelphia? I mean, they play in a terrible division, you guys. Detroit would be leading that division if they played in that division. If they played Dallas twice, they played the Giants twice, they played the Commanders twice, they would have pretty damn good success. So I don't, are they a threat? Do you see them as a threat in the NFC? I don't. I wonder how many people now see Green Bay no longer as a threat because of the loss of Micah Parsons. It's a massive blow, right? So the threats are all in the NFC West. Unless you believe in Chicago, and there's a lot of people who don't believe in Chicago, and therein lies part of the problem. What Mitch was telling us at 7:18 in Mondays with Mitch, what did he say? Nobody wants to see the Lions if they win 3 straight and get into the playoffs. I don't know if I'd go quite that far. I don't think Seattle's scared of them. I don't think the Rams would be scared of them. I don't think San Francisco would be scared of them either. They'd understand that it's going to be a hell of a challenge. But why would you be scared of an 11-win team that needed some help to get into the playoffs and has not been consistent really except for a short spell in October? But I wouldn't do that. If my offense has a rhythm and my offense is good in that sense with the type of athletes and the type of schemes that we run, and we're averaging over 30 points per game, I'm going to score when I can score. I'm going to attack a defense the way they're set up. If there's 5 men in a box, I'll run it. If there's 8 men in a box, I'm going to throw it. Right? I mean, that's just common sense. I don't care about how scary the other team's offense is. Dallas's passing offense was pretty damn good, wasn't it? It was number 1 in the National Football League. Going into the game against the Lions on Thursday Night Football, when Detroit scored 44, some might say, you got to be careful. If Dallas has a strength, it would be their passing game, their passing offense. And Dak Prescott threw for 375 yards that night. The turnovers helped. But if you look at it, Detroit didn't play down to Dallas. Dallas had more first downs. Dallas was better on third down conversions. Dallas ran 20 more plays than the Lions did. They didn't play that way, and yet they still won. They won because they put pressure on Dak Prescott, and they won because they forced turnovers, if you recall. They picked him off twice, and they sacked him 5 times. The difference was yesterday, they picked off Matthew Stafford once. They sacked him only twice. They couldn't get to him consistently enough. It's a lot to ask, but that's what the job is for those defensive linemen, those guys up front. 8:18, we've got Hero and Heels. 8:35, Dan Watson, head coach, Grand Rapids Griffins, joins us here on X's and Bros. Stay with us on a Monday morning, brought to you by Meijer. Could use a pick-me-up, couldn't we? Yeah, we could definitely use a pick-me-up of Pistons basketball. Let's hope we get it tonight when they travel to Boston to take on the Celtics. Welcome to the final hour of X's and Bros. We're brought to you this hour by Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort 818. We've got Hero and Heel. We want your best and worst of the week. And at 8:35, Dan Watson, who is the head coach of the Grand Rapids Griffins, who are off to a historic start, not from a franchise standpoint only, but from a league standpoint, from the AHL. We'll get to that at 8:35 as well. Phone number on the Meijer hotline, 866-838-4843. The text line is sports radio to 21,000. Jared at the mic yesterday is smart. This is from via text. Get those fans to support the Lions no matter what. Now go after the media because he goes, certain people are being negative. We know what he's talking about. Remember this, and I'm not saying everybody doesn't deserve to shoulder some of the blame. We know that they do. Okay, that is obvious. It's a team sport, man. It's a team game. We get all that. When you look at when people talk about Jared Goff this year, and I hate that it always comes down to this. It does, man. It always comes down to Jared Goff this, Jared Goff that, quarterback this, quarterback that. It just kind of drives you crazy, doesn't it? For me, it does, because everybody acts like it's just one quarter, it's one player, and that's ridiculous. Jared Goff this year is fifth in the league in passing yards, second in the league in touchdowns, 29. He's only got 5 picks, and he completes 70% of his passes. Those are the numbers oftentimes associated with quarterbacks, or those are the categories, not the numbers. Those are the categories we look for in quarterbacks. When you want validation on whether or not a guy is good or bad, those are the categories you go to. Shep, where is he at in yards? And quite honestly, I said he's 5th in yards. He's actually 3rd in yards. All right. Only Dak Prescott and Matthew Stafford have thrown for more yards. You look at touchdowns. Only Matthew Stafford, 37, has thrown more touchdowns. When you look at interceptions, how much does it concern you? He and Stafford have both thrown 5 interceptions. That's the fewest in the league. You look at completion percentage. Well, only Drake May and Josh Allen have a better completion percentage. And then when you look at rating, only Matthew Stafford has a better rating. So why is it about Jared Goff? I think the texter's right. He's smart. You go up in the microphone, you go up to the podium and you say, we're a resilient group. Dan Campbell said the same thing. This stuff should sting. Oh, well, yeah, we know. Okay, we've heard that for the last 3 years. We know that it can be a resilient group. Winning in the league is hard. It's harder than you and I will ever truly appreciate and understand. The amount of work these guys put in, it's incredible. It really is. It doesn't always pay off, which is obvious. But the resiliency sometimes, too, is in-game when you're getting beaten and you need to respond in-game, not after-game. They couldn't respond against Philadelphia. They couldn't respond against Kansas City. They couldn't respond against Green Bay in either game. They couldn't respond against Minnesota. And they couldn't respond against the Rams yesterday. They were up by 10, and they couldn't hold them off. And they couldn't play with them either. Rams are better. Seattle, defense, good, really good. Offense, if you had the Lions against any team in the NFC of how they're playing right now, how good would you feel about their chances? Green Bay, not so much. Chicago, maybe not so much. if you've watched them. Philly, sure, no problem. Wouldn't have a problem with that. Rams, yeah, concerning. Seattle, I think Detroit can be as good, if not better, than Seattle. San Francisco, yeah, I think they can beat them too. That's just a belief. What has given, they don't play those teams. They play Minnesota, they play Pittsburgh, they play Minnesota, they play Chicago. As of right now, do you think they can beat Pittsburgh? Yes. You think they can beat Minnesota? Be careful because you thought you could beat them at home as well. It's a really good defense. It is. It's a really good defense. Case in point last night. Dallas is really good offensively, and Minnesota somehow, some way, found a way, despite J.J. McCarthy. I know you don't believe in him. I'm not asking you to believe in him. He put up 34 points against Dallas, and that Minnesota defense held Dallas to 28 points. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration there. Let's get to the final results of our poll question, shall we? Our poll question on Friday was who deserves to win the Heisman? Was it Fernando Mendoza, Julian Sayin, Jeremiah Love, the running back of Notre Dame, or Diego Pavia? Now, we know who won it. Mendoza was first, Pavia was second, Love was third, or Sayin was third, and Love was fourth. Brett Hayes, what were people voting? All right, so the masses agreed with the Heisman Trophy voters. Diego Pavia, acting like a punk, acting stupid. I would think if anybody would sit there and go, you know what? What are you doing? Father, mother, coach, friend. Hey, dude, love you, but that's a bad look. Saying F all the voters because you thought you should win. Are you kidding me? And it really wasn't that close, for crying out loud. All right, let's get to the daily wager. The daily wager on Friday was the Pistons giving the Hawks 7.5, and Trent Ballard won that. Brett, you've talked to Trent. What's his daily wager tonight? All right, Jalen Duren, a double-double against the Celtics as Detroit gets back on the NBA slate here tonight. Jalen Duren, one of those guys who has been very strong in that category. If you look at it, how many double doubles does he have? Well, Nikola Jokic leads the league in double doubles with 22. Jalen Duren has 13 double doubles. Right now, he's averaging 18.5 points and 11 rebounds per game. All right, when we come back, let's get to the hero and heel of the weekend. Who is the best? Who is the worst? Give us a call on the Meijer hotline, 866-838-4843, or you can text your hero and heel into Sports Radio 21,000 as we roll on a Monday morning, brought to you by Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort.
is being the same path as a paper deputy gives the Jewish community particularly.
All right, back with you on X's and Bros Monday through Friday, 6 until 9. Thanks for joining us throughout the great state of Michigan. Or maybe you're catching us streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and on Twitter. Our station affiliates, many of these great station affiliates, all of them really have the Bill Simonson huge show later on today. So we would invite you to join Billy for his big takes, his huge takes, primarily on the Lions. That's what he'll be talking about this afternoon, and I understand it. Let's get to our staple of Monday mornings at 8:18, Hero and Heel, and we welcome yours at any point. Trent's not here, so I did a couple here for Hero. Number one is Eli Heidenreich. Now, he's a Swiss Army knife who plays swingback for Navy, and Blake Horvath. So the two of them. Horvath is the Navy quarterback. Heidenreich had 100 total yards in the game-winning touchdown to give the midshipmen a 1-point win over Army to retain the Commander-in-Chief trophy for a second straight year. And during the game, he became Navy's all-time leading receiver in career yards. Horvath, his first quarter rushing touchdown meant he became the first quarterback since Lamar Jackson during the mid-20s, back-to-back seasons of 1,000 yards and 15 rushing touchdowns. All right, 2020s is what I was referring to. Together, they combined to give Navy their first ever consecutive 10-win season. 10 wins last year, 10 wins already this year. It's a hell of a job by both those guys in a game that, brings out the best in so many. First of all, CBS does an unbelievable job of covering that game. Kudos to them. They should win an award every single year for their game day coverage of that event. Their open is phenomenal. The uniforms for those two teams, somebody told me it took 4 hours to paint the Navy helmets. Those uniforms were kick-ass. I liked Army's better. And part of it is, and I was watching it with somebody who said, that is so cool that they have United States Army on their back. They don't have their last names. I'm surprised Navy went with the last names, but either way, it was an incredible game. The other hero for me is Trevor Lawrence, the Jaguars quarterback, who threw for 330 yards, a career-high 5 touchdowns, and he rushed for another one in Jacksonville's blowout win over the Jets. Didn't turn it over for a third straight game. Boasted a career-high 136.7 quarterback ranking and became the first quarterback to ever do that, plus rush for 50 yards. So all that combined, he's the first quarterback to do that, which is absolutely crazy. Freddie sent in a hero and heel. His hero is Mendoza, his Heisman speech, even though he wonders how his crying would work in a locker room if he makes the NFL. I get it. I personally don't think it's bad to show emotion. Michael Jordan cried when he won a championship. Isaiah Thomas cried when he won a championship. What's wrong with that? You've accomplished something. You're so happy that it makes you cry. You cry when your kids are born. What's wrong with crying a little bit when becoming the first Indiana Hoosier to ever win the Heisman Trophy? Now, if it happened every single time they played, it would be a little bit of a problem, right? Here's my heel. It's predictably, I'm sure you could have guessed this, Diego Pavia, the Vanderbilt quarterback and Heisman runner-up, wrote on his Instagram story, F all the voters. Classy. Good way to endear yourself to others. He finished with 189 first-place votes compared to Fernando Mendoza's 643 first-place votes. It's the same guy who predicted that his team was going to blow out, or an easy win is what he called it, an easy win over Alabama. I think it was on October 4th. And the Crimson Tide came out and smoked the Commodores 31-14. Look, I don't think there's anything wrong with being confident. I think in order for you to get to that level, even at the collegiate level, you've got to have moxie. But there's also a time for you to check it at the door, don't you think? Let me ask you this. This is a kid who shows very little class and thinks of the respect in the Heisman voting, that's pretty obvious. And yet he wouldn't give the same respect he's asking for to Alabama when they played earlier this year. It's not like I'm an Alabama fan. I don't care. I don't care if Alabama wins or loses, to be honest with you. I like Kalen DeBoer, but not enough to sit there and say, man, I'm rooting for Alabama every single weekend. But this dude goes out there and he gave no respect to the Crimson Tide. Vanderbilt had beaten them the year before. Gives no respect to the number of players who are they're going to be first-round picks. There's going to be a handful of Alabama players who will be predicted to be first-round picks. Caden Proctor is going to be a first-round pick. I don't think there's any question about that. He's the left tackle. So anyway, he won't do that, and yet he's mad because he didn't feel like he got the respect from the Heisman voters. And I can't help but think, I wonder if anybody thought, this kid's had a really good season, but forget it. It's not like Mendoza didn't. He had 33 touchdowns. Somebody said to me over the weekend, they said, well, here's the problem, Shep. And I said, what's that? And they said, they're just, Mendoza just didn't have those great numbers. He didn't have those really high numbers that make you just go, wow. Okay. Yeah, I get it. He did have 33 touchdowns. That led FBS, okay? Or that led the Division I. He only threw 6 picks. His quarterback rating was out of sight. So I said, well, what is it you're looking for? And he's a Notre Dame fan. He said, well, Jeremiah Love. I'm like, well, okay. He finished 4th in the country in rushing yards anyway. And in terms of touchdowns are concerned, he finished 3rd in that regard. Nobody had that year that made you go, whoa, I can't get over this. This blows me away. I don't know if we'll ever see anything like it again. Nobody had that type of season. I think there's something to be said about some humility every once in a while. Freddie's heel. I think by the end of the day, Scott Harris signs a hot dog vendor to a 1-year deal and an usher in hopes of trading them too if they're out of it in July. Well, that may be the case, Freddie, but we're talking about the here and now. I think they signed Kenley Jansen. Maybe you're not thrilled with that. The back end of their bullpen, how it goes, I don't know. It's gonna vary. I mean, I don't think they're gonna be locked into one spot. That's just not the way AJ Hinch, it's just not the way he manages. With Kenley Jansen and with Will Vest, and they've got some arms in the back there. I get why people should feel good about the back end of the bullpen. Now, do you feel really good about the front end or the earlier part of the bullpen? Probably not. Yeah, probably not. I mean, I like Kyle Finnegan. I like the signing, 2 years, $19 million. Kenley Jansen does not necessarily move my needle, to be honest with you. I know what he's done in his career. That's fine. And it's only a 1-year contract. So that's cool too. And it gives you 3 guys. Jansen last year converted 29 to 30 saves. That's pretty damn good. All right. With an ERA of 2.5. But 5 teams past 6 seasons now for him. Can't help but wonder a little bit. And he's a little bit older. He's 38. When will he be 39? Well, I don't know exactly when he'll be 39, but September. So he'll be 38 when he pitches for the Tigers this year. So I get that. Our phone number is on the Meijer hotline, 866-838-4843. Okay, when we come back, excited to talk with a true winner, Dan Watson, the fastest ECHL coach to 100 wins, a guy who's got his team in first place and just set an AHL record. He is the manager, yes. The skipper, yes. The head coach, all the above of the Grand Rapids Griffins. The head coach of the Griffins joins us when we come back on X's and Bros, brought to you by Soaring Eagle Casino and Resorts right after this.
It's slammed as for the lead for the perfectly second. This is
There's that famous line from Kurt Signetti, the Indiana head football coach, who says, "I win, Google me." Dan Watson could say the same thing. He's never missed the playoffs as a head coach. He's the head coach at Grand Rapids. They're off to an elite start, the greatest start in American Hockey League history, and he joins us here on X's and Bros. Coach, an honor to have you on. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it very much. How you been? Yeah, you should. What's impressed you most? The league high 93 goals for or the league best 44 goals against? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. hmm I'd love your response to this because in over my years in talking with coaches in different sports, it's not that you ever want to lose, but you don't mind if your team faces some adversity. I think it's fair to say your team hasn't faced a lot of that. You did last night in a come from behind 2-1 shootout win over Chicago. But overall, how do you feel your team handles what little adversity you've seen, or am I missing some of the adversity because I see the role that your team is on? hmm Dan Watson's team has done something no team in American Hockey League history has ever done. In their first 24 games, his team is 22 1 0 and 1. The 0 is the overtime losses. The last one that I mentioned is shootout losses. You mentioned Leonard. He gets called up to Detroit. Eric Gustafson sent back down, I believe. Just overall, the challenges of coaching a team, managing egos, and all those things when at times your roster can fluctuate. What's the biggest challenge there for a coach like you? Mhm. Mhm. Mm-hmm.
Essentially, so that we can go in and put this part of the investigation in bed so that there can people who can start to what should be just the good times. But it's so hard to do both if you have somebody
Yeah, it's such a great point on where coaching becomes almost like a therapist, because you've got the highs of John Leonard moving up, but then a veteran in Eric Gustafson coming back down. What's that conversation like? Because that's a change of mood and a change of attitude, I would guess, to a certain extent. Hmm. Yeah. I would guess you're like many high level coaches. You want your locker room to be player led. That's what great teams usually have. Who are your best leaders on your team? Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Always love that, especially about hockey players, not afraid to speak their mind. We're talking with Dan Watson, the outstanding coach of the Grand Rapids Griffins, who have set an AHL record for their start. It's been amazing that they've just got one loss. I remember talking with Barry Smith one time. He was an assistant coach for Scotty Bowman, as you know. And then talking with Brendan Shanahan in the Red Wings locker room and asking Shanahan, what do you learn from a guy who never was as good as you? How in the world do you take advice from a guy who hasn't accomplished what you have? You're in a similar situation. You're coaching to guys who've played at the highest level. How do you gain their trust? Hmm. 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 I love that. So very important. And you know, a lot of people who are Red Wing fans are always wondering. People in Grand Rapids are so tuned into your club, and for good reason. But the people in Detroit are always wondering, why does this guy deserve the opportunity? Besides points, why does he deserve the opportunity? Who's the next wave of young players? What have you noticed with some of the young players who might be on track eventually to wear a Red Wings wheeled sweater for people who are wondering about that? Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. How often do you talk with members of the Red Wings staff, either front office or staff, to give them updates on how your team is doing besides them looking at and eye popping numbers that you've put together so far? Yep. Okay. Hmm. I think anytime I talk with coaches in various sports, they are so into their sports, sometimes they lose sight of some other sports. What else do you like to do besides coach hockey and watch players develop? Yeah, sure. Yeah. My guess is that anytime I played with hockey players, they can hit the golf ball a mile. What's the best score you've ever carded? Yeah. I could totally relate, except, well, I could totally relate. Listen, really enjoyed the conversation. Congratulations. It's been too long since we had you on, and my apologies for that. We'll keep you track. We'll keep track, and we hope we can talk again soon. Keep up the great work, Dan. Appreciate the time very much today. Yeah, you bet. That's Dan Watson, the head coach of the Grand Rapids Griffins, winners again last night, and on some type of major role. Thanks to Brett Hayes for joining us today. Honored to have him behind the scenes and doing what he does best. He'll do it for the Huge Show later on today as well. Don't forget to listen to Bill Simonson from 3 to 6. And we're back with you tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock, here on X's and Bros across the great state of Michigan. This hour has been brought to you by our friends at Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort. Have a great Monday, everybody.